The 159-page audit is based on 44 public submissions and information received from both private and government sources. The report identifies 6 issues of prime significance. They are sedimentation of the lake due to urban runoff, thermal pollution from power stations, nutrient accumulation resulting from sewage discharge and urban and rural runoff, toxic trace metals, fish productivity and the protection of wetlands. Most of the 44 public submissions pointed to sedimentation as a major problem. According to the audit, urban development around the lake has accelerated the sedimentation. The effects of the sediment, say the State Pollution Control Commission, are to limit navigation, impair recreation and add to the nutrient load. The recommendations are that all new urban developments include measures for retarding sedimentation and that similar controls be installed in existing urban areas. The second major area of concern is thermal pollution resulting from power station effluents. The audit does not point to any significant effects of that pollution, but nevertheless makes some recommendations on its control. It calls on the Electricity Commission to consider the following options: load rescheduling during summer when the water temperature is highest, the use of extra cooling pumps in summer, and the installation of alternative cooling equipment. The audit claims the third issue, nutrient accumulation, is a legacy of urban development and particularly sewage effluents. Nutrient concentrations have increased steadily since the 1950s, promoting algae growth and reducing the clarity of the water. The recommendations call for further examination of the problem, the removal of nutrients at sewage treatment works, or the diversion of sewage effluents from the lake. The existence of toxic trace metals in the lake is the fourth major concern. It is feared that if the concentrations of those metals are allowed to increase, contamination of marine life will result. Tests show that a large proportion of mussels and cockles do contain dangerous lead and cadmium levels. To overcome the problem, the audit recommends further study, the dredging of contaminated sediments and closer examination of discharges from the Sulphide Corporation and motor vehicles being driven around the lake's perimeter. Many submissions to the Pollution Control Commission cited fish productivity as a major problem, but the audit claims there has been no significant impact on the availability of fish and prawns in recent years. It recommends a survey of fish and prawn resources and continued harvesting regulation. There has been a great deal of attention paid recently to the importance of wetlands preservation, which is the sixth issue discussed in the audit. The audit points to wetlands around the lake as a source of food and shelter for fish and a habitat for wildlife. The conservation of all existing wetlands is recommended, with special attention to be paid to seagrass beds. The environmental audit has been welcomed by conservationists and lake residents, but some fear the recommendations will remain just that.
We're going into action straight away. Our people are making the initial contacts with the bodies within the next week. We'll be sending copies of the reports. We'll be discussing it with the bodies that have to take the action as a result of the recommendations that are in this report.
So there's going to be more than talking over the recommendations?
Certainly.
The final recommendation made by the State Pollution Control Commission is a simple one, but one that's likely to have the most obvious and immediate impact on the appearance of the lake. The Commission wants the Lake Macquarie and Wyong councils to organise a clean-up of the lake's foreshores. This morning, 37 members of the Hunter Region Motorcycle Riders Association made donations at the blood bank. The association has been donating blood for many years, where blood has gone a step further in an effort to boost the blood bank supplies. The motorcyclists are urging all social and service groups in the region to enter in a blood donating competition. Taking part, they say, is easy. Group donations can be made, or individuals can have their donations added to a group tally. The president of the Motorcycle Riders Association, Brian Wilson, explains the aim of the competition.
We're asking people who are in their groups, Lions, Apex, any social clubs or business houses, to organise a group donation and donate blood through the year and register it for that group. At the end of the year, the group with the highest donation will be presented with a shield at the blood bank and also a smaller plaque to take back to their clubhouse.
The aims of the new club are to provide outings for members and their families and to get together and talk about their favourite subject, the GT Ford Falcon. It seems enthusiasm for the GT Falcon hasn't waned, despite the fact that their last year of production was almost 10 years ago. Some of these Fords have appreciated almost 1,000% since they were put on the showroom floors. This XY Falcon, nicknamed the Shaker, could bring as much as $35,000. Mr. Rick White.
Well, some of them are worth $4,000 brand new, and they can bring about $10,000 to $20,000 for some models, and what they call the Phase 3 Shaker is bringing anything up to $30,000, and that's just 1971 model.
Why do you think that is?
Well, just enthusiasts. The muscle car of Australia. They won all the races at Bathurst, and since Ford got out of racing several years ago, the Commodores have been taking over the field, but we don't let that worry us too much.
After 7 years in power as the Premier of the Polish government in exile in London, Mr. Kazimierz Sabat is still hopeful that he can take over from the communist government. Polish communities all over the world support the symbolic government's fight, and to keep the Australian people abreast of its progress, Premier Sabat visited Newcastle today. Although not recognised by other governments, Premier Sabat says his government is gaining public support. Premier Sabat says Soviet control could weaken or strengthen as a result of Mr. Andropov's death.
In the long run, I think Andropov's death may start an era of further changes in the Soviet Union, which may perhaps be beneficial to the world peace.
What do you think these changes might be?
Difficult to say, but perhaps the period of difficulties connected with choosing the successor may make Russia easier to negotiate with. On the other hand, it may make it harder.
Prison officers from around the state went on strike during the week after principal prison officers continued to work during a stop-work meeting at Long Bay Jail. The strike spread to 11 other prisons. Yesterday, prison officers at Cessnock decided to stay out until another meeting on Monday, and Maitland also voted to continue their strike until they meet on Tuesday morning. Police officers from Newcastle, Wallsend, Belmont, Cessnock, Maitland, Muswellbrook and Singleton have been manning the jails since the dispute began, with executive officers providing meals and supervising prisoners who have been confined to their cells. The accident happened 2 hours earlier on the New England Highway Frankfurt. It's believed the man who was riding a bicycle east along the highway turned into the path of a motorcycle travelling in the same direction. The motorcycle rider was taken to Maitland Hospital, but later released. No charges will be made as a result of the accident.
The powers that be down
The
there.
president of the New South Wales
two
Police
particular
Association,
areas
Mr
that,
John
need
Greaves, was in
personnel.
Newcastle today to discuss with police officials the critical shortage of manpower in the region, particularly during jail strikes. Mr Greaves said that police stations were not geared up to step into prison guard duty, and many officers were on 12-hour shifts. He was also here to talk about an influx of 30 police into the area, mainly plainclothes officers. But what the region needs is more general duty police, according to Mr Greaves. But how many?
In the Newcastle area itself, about 30 to 40. On the surrounds, well, that's anyone's guess, because my understanding is that a lot of the areas have had to close down. They're working short-handed, so you might be looking upwards of 100.
Well, is the union trying to do anything to campaign for this area?
Yes, certainly. We've overall, we don't isolate particular areas, to be honest, but on an overall basis, we still say we're 1,500 short, and probably we're about 1,000 shy when we say that. So there should be 2,500. That's on the St Johnson report on a ratio basis.
And what are you doing to help this area?
In this area, well, of course, we mention to the Minister, and we mention to the Premier whenever we get the opportunity, that people are needed. Now, when I return to Sydney, I'll be taking the matter up with the powers that be down there of two particular areas that need personnel.
According to tutors in the CAE's Plant and Wildlife Illustration course, successful students need more than good eyes and a steady hand. They must have an almost fanatical interest in this exacting form of art, which might need 12 hours or more to be put into a sketch of a single butterfly. But following publicity that the National Parks and Wildlife Service established a $1,500 scholarship or prize for students in the course, inquiries have come in from many parts of Australia about the 12 months postgraduate program. The intake is limited to 9 students, but in fact the demand for wildlife illustrators apparently exceeds supply.
People are suddenly realising that skills that we do have, but we haven't really pushed them right into this specialised field. So a lot of people now are perhaps becoming more aware of it, in a sense, I suppose, because they are becoming more aware of the environment as well.
What about graduates of the course? Have they actually got employment in that field?
Yes, at the moment we have a student working in the museum in Brisbane on flatworms. Also, one student worked in Western Australia in the museum there, working on small mammals, and then completed frieze work, posters for the museum. But this particular field is very specialised, and the CSIRO in particular are quite delighted that this course is running, and certainly the national parks. They were very keen and obviously came forward with a grant to assist students.
That's good. Watched by a subdued crowd, the sombre procession made slow progress towards the traditional resting place of Soviet leaders, Lenin's mausoleum in Red Square. The cortege was preceded by dozens of officers carrying huge wreaths, others bearing cushions on each of which was placed one of the medals Andropov was awarded during his 40-year party career. The closed coffin, draped in red and black crepe, was carried on a gun carriage towed by a military armoured vehicle. Members of the elite corps of guards officers marched a slow goose step alongside the carriage, which was followed by members of Andropov's immediate family. A military band played Chopin's funeral march. Australia was represented at the funeral by the Treasurer, Mr Paul Keating. Some significance has been attached to the United States decision to be represented by Vice President Bush, not President Reagan. Andropov's death last Thursday came after only 15 months in office. In his first public appearance since appointment as the new Soviet president, Konstantin Chernenko delivered the eulogy.
We're deeply sorrowed by the death of Yuri Vladimirovich Andropov, that glorious son of the Communist Party, that outstanding activist of the Communist Party. Until his last days, Yuri Vladimirovich gave his full for the party.
These two gentlemen to enable us to keep well
Nelson
informed.
Bay turned up in force last night
well informed
to
comment.
hear
I
council
thank you very
debate a
much.
rescission
Any
motion
questions?
put forward by Councillor
General public
Crichton,
to me and
who
others,
supported the
that
concerns
because
of
the council-
retailers. The controversy is over this block of land in Donald Street, Nelson Bay. It's owned by Shortland County Council. But when Port Stephens Council heard that two developers were interested in buying the property for commercial development, the council stepped in and offered Nesca $200,000 for the site. The reason? It wanted to make sure no development went ahead on this site because the council feels it will threaten the viability of its own huge shopping proposal.
Also by
at
the general
Salaman
public to
Bay.
me and others, that because of the
Council's move was
council's
seen by
proposed
some
purchase of the
last night
subject
as being
land,
morally
we
wrong.
expressed here,
Councillor
that
Crichton's
Nelson
attempt to
Bay
stop
is
council
quite a
from
large
buying the
shopping
Nelson
centre.
Bay site
We do know
failed by 8 votes to 3.
will not be successful
He even
and will
lost
only
the
detract
support of
very
Councillor
strongly
Mackenzie,
from the
who was
existing
one of those
shopping
who put
centre.
forward the rescission motion and
The
then
Chamber has
voted
been-
against it when a
has
division was called.
in the
The
central
council
area.
will now
basis.
stick to its original decision to buy the
70%
Nelson
of
Bay
the
land,
commercially zoned
stopping
area
any
in Nelson
development
Bay
plans which were
paid
in the
themselves
wind.
to the minor
Retailers at Nelson
supermarket in the
Bay
Salamander
believe
Bay
council has
development.
set a dangerous
We would seek
precedent.
It's a very dangerous precedent that I do not like personally, and obviously none of the none of the people who are here this evening obviously appreciate what council have done.
There's one more snag now. Even though Port Stephens has agreed to buy the land, Shortland County Council has not agreed to sell it to the council yet. That's because its decision is also subject to a rescission motion.
The building registered Amazon is not so big by world standards, but 226 metres long. It's an imposing sight on Newcastle Harbour. The huge ship has nearly finished loading 100 steam coal, which is bound for a new power station in Israel. The capacity of the Port Waratah coal service loader and the deeper harbour channel, these large ships are becoming regular visitors. Coal represented 85% of the cargo shipped through the port last year. If all goes to plan, the Amazon will load 127,032 tonnes of coal. The previous port record was 123,000 tonnes. That record was established by the Orinoco last year. The Orinoco is a sister ship to the...